Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Simon Dealy about staffing trends towards prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Simon Dealy, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to be with you today. You're joining us from the Boston area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to talk about staffing trends generally, but specifically towards prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we get started, I wanted to share Simon's bio with everybody. Simon Dealy is CEO of Higher Technologies. He is a senior executive with a wealth of achievement in operations, finance, strategic planning, M&A, business development, and company startups. With over 20 years of seasoning across a broad spectrum of industries and multiple countries, Simon has proven experience in identifying strategic issues, dramatically improving sales, administering the organization, raising capital, and improving processes. Having served in many C-level roles and as a management consultant, he enables corporations to have a well thought out and executed business strategy and financial plan, take calculated risks that allow the business to embrace change, and possess a good understanding of the competitive landscape and the client needs. A wonderful background. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and my audience today. Anything else you would like to share with us by way of your background or personal context before we dive on into the conversation?
Well, you did a great job there, John. Appreciate that. No, so just from the accent, I'm originally from Australia, moved to the US back in 2000. I don't think I'm losing this accent anytime soon, living in the US for 22 years. And like you said, operating in professional services my entire career, banking and finance, legal, Big Four accounting, owned my own global consulting firm, and now it's working with Higher Technologies, which is it's a capital allocator. We're doing a consolidation strategy through human capital, buying and bringing in staffing companies, HR consulting, and SaaS related technologies into the business. So yeah, thank you again for having me on the podcast today.
Yeah, excellent. And it is cool. You're doing some great stuff with Higher Technologies, and I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about that as we're going through and discussing the topic today, because it relates heavily to what we're going to be talking about. Let's start with just laying the landscape a little bit. What are some of the broadest staffing trends that you're seeing right now? We're coming out of this pandemic that's kind of moved into endemic form. It's going to be here forever, but hopefully a little bit less serious or concerning, from a public health standpoint. But organizations are still grappling with it. We've been dealing with the Great Resignation, the Great Reawakening, the Great Reevaluation, quiet quitting. All of the buzzwords that people have been throwing around. The bottom line is it's a tight labor market. It's hard for organizations to get good people and to hang on to them. What are some of those and related, staffing trends that you're seeing if we zoom out and look at the macro level?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Was certainly a shift after sort of started getting out of the pandemic where the leverage was more in the candidate's hand than the employer's hand, and this fully embracing the remote workforce, and that's obviously gets talked about quite a bit. And that's really this high demand for these qualified candidates. And on the companies are more willing now to, if they can, have this remote or hybrid workforce, looking at a broader scope of where they might have traditionally brought resources in. They don't have to be close to the office, not just the closest best resource, but the best resource. And that extends into, so with what we're doing, we've got operations up in Canada, looking, south of the border into the Canadian market to find those resources, because there's an exchange rate arbitrage, but also access to another resource pool. And so, companies are still struggling with, how do we handle the bringing those resources into the business that don't want to be full-time in the office, having that hybrid environment that allows them to get the people they want and also retain. You talked about the Great Resignation. There are a lot of opportunities out there, even with the tightening economy. It's kind of strange. You have this full employment going on where the economy is slowing down. Now, of course, you would expect that would start to slow, but there's a lot of demand to be soaked up before it starts tipping the other way. On top of that, there's a greater awareness of the gig economy. A lot of people talk about the gig economy, where that contingent workforce model, we're not going to bring somebody in full time. We're going to bring in resources as and when we need them, and being able to be flexible like that as an organization, where you're tapping into that resource pool. And there's a lot of examples of the gig economy and how that's growing so much. It's expected to be a very, very large industry and growing industry because of the demand for those resources, and the resources themselves wanting to have that flexibility. Mostly in sort of the millennial group is where we're seeing the younger group of employees are more open to that sort of on-demand type of work environment. And all of that working on at the same time that you've got companies trying to improve the diversity within their businesses as well, especially at the board level and C-suite.
Yeah, and as I think about the trends towards the gig economy, now certainly before the pandemic, it was already trending upwards, right? Trending upwards towards more contingent work, more contract and freelance work, and that only got accelerated and put on steroids during the gig economy. And like you said, younger generations seem to be more and more open to it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that's only the only type of work that people want to do, but more and more people are embracing a side hustle, right? So you have your day job and then you do, something else that really fulfills your creative needs, or, taps back into maybe what you studied in school and you kind of got a little bit away from in your career or whatever, right? But people doing these side hustles and doing more gig work, there's lots of platforms now to connect employers with talent, freelance talent. So it's easier and easier to be able to manage that. There's just a definite move that direction. And whether we're talking about freelance, gig work, that kind of stuff, or we're talking just about remote or hybrid work, one of the outcomes of this, I'm not sure it was one that people had originally really thought seriously about, but one thing people have definitely noticed is that once you break down the geographical barriers and limitations around who you hire, so now you're not just hiring from your surrounding metropolitan area, but you truly can hire from anywhere in the world, anyone with a good internet connection who's able to make the synchronous meetings when they're necessary and otherwise get the work done. It means you can hire a really diverse workforce, people from all different backgrounds, socioeconomic status, race, religion, ethnicity, etc. Like all the things, right? That you can just have a really diverse team when you embrace the distributed model of work, whether that's full-time employees, contract, freelance, whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was probably the focus companies were having as well. Look, there was a lot of calls and demand for, diversity at the board level and trying to improve that diversity at the C-suite. And that's obviously filtering down throughout the entire organization, because a lot of benefits come from having that within your business. You're having these different opinions, different viewpoints of the world actually makes teams much more productive and efficient, because you're not going to get that traditional groupthink that you might have, and you are embracing those other opinions and getting different perspectives on the problem. And it's not just trying to get to the solution as quickly as possible, but looking at all the different alternatives there. And so that's really helping companies that are taking that broader perspective that you're saying, like, getting a broader talent pool that they're bringing into the company. So it's a huge benefit to them. Plus, also, we're seeing companies seeing a lot of other benefits as well. There's the mental health aspect too, because you're not requiring people are staying connected and they're feeling part of a community, but they're also not required to have this commute and missing time with their families. And that's another big part of why it's helpful to have that workforce that you can have being remote, because they're going to get a lot of benefits from that. And that obviously then translates into better productivity for the company as well. So a lot of benefits that come from having that wider lens, and you definitely are seeing it, like you were saying, with companies. I see it a lot with our business, because we're doing with North America, and it's obviously not as, there's a lot of diversity there for sure, but even expanding into the Asian markets and European markets as well, to find those talented resources, and understanding that scarcity can actually work to your advantage when you start to tap into those other resource pools.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned C-level positions and board positions, being a focus of many organizations as it relates to DEI efforts. I was actually having a meeting with an organization just the other day, and I won't mention names, but they've put a lot of effort into their DEI stuff. They've enacted a lot of policies and procedures, and they've done a lot of things to move the needle. But most of it has happened at the lower levels. So they have increased the level of diversity and equity throughout the organization. They've worked hard on a culture of inclusion and belonging throughout the organization. But when you get to the C-suite and the board level, there's almost no diversity whatsoever. And it's not because they're not committed to trying to get it done, but it's really because there's just been less turnover there. There's people that have been there for a long time, and they were all there before they had these efforts towards DEI. And so how would you approach an organization that might be struggling with C-level roles in trying to increase the level of diversity if there's not a high level of turnover there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. People are saying, I've heard the argument, well, there's just not the qualified people to bring into those positions, which is completely untrue. There's a great depth of talent in that area to bring that diversity into the business, obviously. And then the next question is, well, we don't have any open positions. But then you have to look at the hierarchy of the business overall. How did you end up at the starting point bringing in your CFO, for example, or COO, CEO? What do you traditionally do? Are you hiring from within, or are you hiring from without? And having that sort of the next in lines, having more diversity for those next in lines, so that you do have people that you can hire within into the business. There is always that pyramid problem within organizations where you have to need the person at the top to go before the rest can move up, and that definitely does become a bit of a stopping point for organizations. But okay, that's how it is today. Think about that succession planning process. Think about what's going to come next through the organization. Be very committed to bringing the diversity at those levels below, so that they are ready to move up into those higher positions. Certainly at the board, you need to have, there is, a lot of long tenure, I know, at the board level, but then have that commitment. When an opportunity does come up, we are committing to go through this process to look to bring diversity into the board. We are going to be making a diversity hire onto the board. And, one of our practice units leaders international, half of what they do, half of their revenue is coming from that DEI side, because companies are trying to build that network. They are trying to build that succession planning to the businesses. While they don't have the opportunity today, they are making sure that they've got the training programs and the succession planning in place that will allow them to, over time, bring that into the business as well.
Focusing on that diversity hire if and when, an opening occurs, and focusing on the talent pipeline and the progression, so that you have people waiting in the wings, ready to fill in and contribute in those positions as appropriate. Those are great approaches. And it's interesting. I hear often, as you said, the argument is, often, well, there weren't any other qualified candidates or things of this nature, whether it's, having more female candidates and hires, or BIPOC hires, or whatever, you're talking about. And sometimes people are a little bit resistant because they don't want to be seen as making a hire base solely off of a diversity kind of a perspective. They want to be able to say, I'm hiring the best qualified person regardless. And I guess two things to that. When I hear that, I'm like, okay, one, I don't believe that there aren't really quality, highly qualified people that could fill those positions. I just don't believe that argument. I think if you say you don't have anyone in the pool, then I think you're not looking hard enough. But two, I think it's definitely appropriate to prioritize diversity hires, especially when there's very limited levels of diversity in C-level positions or in board seats or whatever, because the rest of the organization looks to those positions. And if they look, if they see the board of directors and they only see a bunch of, middle-aged white dudes, it sends a message, and it's an important message both ways. It can hurt you, but it can also help you. And it's not just about the PR, but it's about the culture of the organization. Same with C-level roles, that it is important. Now, I'm not saying you need to say, absolutely, we're going to hire a woman of color for this position. Absolutely. But let's look at how we can prioritize diversity hire if we're really lacking in that area, to really shore up what we're trying to accomplish. And I think if we open our minds a little bit to what it looks like to have a really good qualified person, get rid of the, prune back the unnecessary stuff that we might think is necessary, but it's really just limiting the pool, then all of a sudden we can really get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's been a good movement in terms of how job descriptions are being written to remove implicit biases out of job descriptions. People talk about how, is AI going to really help us get rid of biases like that? A lot of the applicant tracking systems now have a certain, mechanical process that resumes will go through to help remove some of those biases. But then having a commitment that, okay, we're going to have a job description written for what we need in that skill set within the position, but we are going to have a preference towards bringing a diversity hire into the company. There is nothing wrong with that, because it's you obviously are doing it because you don't have that diversity today. You're trying to increase that within the business. The employer has identified, this is good for us. We're not doing it just for the external optics of, okay, yep, tick the box, we got the diversity hire. It's been done because it's been proven that having that diversity at those different levels within the organization makes the organization more effective, more efficient. It allows for the organization to be more innovative. There's a lot of benefits that come from doing that. So it's not just lip service to being, yeah, we should do this because we want to look good out there. Trust me, the companies want to make money. They know they want to be effective and efficient, and it's being identified that this is a great way to do that. So that's, I think, another reason why companies adds to all the positive reasons why companies want to be doing this.
Yeah, I often talk about the combination of the business case, which is clear. You just outlined many of the benefits. It helps the bottom line. It increases levels of critical thinking and innovation and creativity within the organization, better strategic planning, the ability to look around the corner and anticipate the change and the challenges that are going to impact the organization. All of that increases as we get more diversity around the table of all varieties. But there's also the human case of just like, let's be good to everyone. Let's, when we talk about equal employment opportunity, is that just something we say and we try to comply legally with kind of the minimum bar, or is it something we actually are committed to? And if we're really committed to it and we're focused on not only the business case, but the human case of just treating everyone with dignity and respect and equitably, again, it's a win-win. Like, we can have really dynamic organizations of inclusion and belonging, where everyone has the opportunity to come to the workplace, be their true authentic self, contribute in meaningful ways where they're valued, they're needed, they're wanted, they feel a part of the team. That's the ideal. That's what we all want. That's what we all want. We want to work in an organization, in a team like that. And that's what everyone else wants too. So the business case, the human case, both go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive, as sometimes people kind of paint a false dichotomy, but they can actually be mutually reinforcing and really just help the overall success of the organization. So yeah, let's focus on getting more diversity into our various roles throughout the levels of the organization. And it's great. I love it when I see an organization that's struggled in this area. They put effort into it and they start to see the benefits. But it can often take a little bit longer to get to those top levels, if for no other reason than there's just not as many positions, right?
Right, exactly.
At the higher levels of the hierarchy. And so you have to be extra committed and extra attentive to making sure you're thinking through succession planning and all of the things that will go into helping you have more diversity as seats open up at those C-level roles.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's quite interesting. When I had my previous company was a global consulting firm, and I got to travel to a lot of different regions and got to see a lot of different cultures, and it was a great experience, because you can't take those preconceived ideas and how you would operate businesses even in these other regions. You can't take that, what my US operation and put it into Japan or China or other parts of Europe and expect it's going to work exactly the same. It's just you get a greater sensitivity, but the things that you learn from that process are great because you can apply them across the whole organization. So yeah, again, I think we're obviously saying there's some great benefits there, but it can take time. It's not always a quick thing to have happen. And as opportunities arise within an organization, you need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, it isn't quick. It's worth the effort. It's worth the commitment, and you will see the benefits from it. Simon, this has just been a really great conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk with you and your listeners. As I mentioned, I'm CEO of Hire Technologies. It's a hire.company. We are buying, consolidating within the staffing industry. We have a unique approach where we keep the brands and we let those businesses grow, and we provide them working capital to do so, but then have a consolidation of a shared services center. Want to bring all these different people together. It's really the ethos of our company's leadership, bring different leaders together and share those ideas across the business units. And we've had 7 consecutive quarters of growth. Really happy with how the business is going. So that's how you can find us, hire.company. And then certainly, as we're talking about the DEI side, again, it's a very big part of one of our business units and for our business overall. And the reason it's growing so well and doing so well is because it is, again, a very, very important thing that all companies should be looking to do because of all the many, many benefits that come from that. So, John, thanks again for the time today.
Thank you. I encourage my audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Simon and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.